Good morning, everybody, and I hope this video finds you in great health and spirit. All right, so I was asked on my DMs on almost all my platforms that I'm on about a particular system or style or technique or instructor. And though some of you guys ask a legitimate question, some of you guys are just trying to instigate an issue between two instructors. And I'm not going to fall for it. But again, like I said, some of your questions were legitimate. So first off, let me start by saying, just because you know doesn't mean you know how. And just because you know how doesn't mean you know how to instruct. And just because you're an instructor, it doesn't make you an instructor, right? That being said, if you want to know whether an instructor is good or not, I always tell folks, hey, people DM me and they say, hey, Mr. Trailer, I like what you teach, but I'm way over here in Wisconsin. Do you know anybody? And no, I don't, sorry. But just look for whatever discipline or whatever style it is that you're looking for. If the instructor is good, he will have a paper trail, meaning that if you go to his website or if you go and you talk to him in person, he should have a paper trail of certificates or certification of what he was trained under, who his instructors were, and so on and so forth, right? So you want to make sure that you check the background. So I have this listed here. The second is, like I stated, whose are his instructors? Did he get taught by an instructor in that particular discipline? What do I mean? Okay, for example, if your instructor is teaching you gun, is he a gun instructor? Does he have experience with guns? If not, then there might be an issue there because he hasn't been taught that discipline effectively where he can teach you. Okay? So you have to look at what discipline is he teaching and has he been trained in that discipline. Again, just because you know doesn't mean you know how, right? And just because you know how doesn't mean you have an in-depth knowledge and understanding of that particular discipline. So that's the first thing that I would tell any potential client or student is look up the instructor's background, who's his instructors, how did he become an instructor to be able to teach this, okay? Basically that, okay? Once you look at that, then you have to look at what is he teaching? Is he credible, right? And I've seen instructors come and go. I'm 49. I'm sorry, I'm 59. Okay, I've been in the industry for quite a long time, been in the martial arts since I was knee-high to grasshopper, roughly about 5 years old. Several black belts in several systems, and they hold my pants up quite nicely. The point is this, that if the instructor isn't really trained in that discipline, it's going to catch up with him. And what I mean by that is that I went to it was called a gathering. There's a bunch of instructors. Someone, I forgot who put it together, but basically he got a bunch of instructors together to have the gathering, and it was instructors sharing information with other instructors. And everybody would have an hour of whatever discipline or techniques he wanted to show. Well, some of these instructors that really didn't have good training under their belts suffered greatly among instructors that had that experience and that training. When you get to a certain level of either clients, students, or other instructors, you're going to see if they're full of it or not. When you get to that top tier echelon of operators, instructors, you're going to see it right away. But unfortunately, people that aren't in the industry or that don't know anything, they will never see it, they will never catch it. Okay? All right, now there was a video that you guys questioned about. I don't know the context of the video. It just picks up and, okay, although on some of the stuff it says officers and stuff like that. Okay, this applies to me. As an instructor, if I'm teaching law enforcement or military, 99% of the time, I request them to come in full uniform. The reason is that if I'm teaching a technique and they're slick, yeah, they'll be able to do the technique, but once they don their duty gear, all of a sudden that technique isn't practical for what they have on. Okay, so if they're running slick means warm up, shorts, tennis shoes, t-shirt. They're not geared up. So if they're not geared up, and I'm showing them something, that particular officer may not be able to do the technique because they don't have dexterity because of what's on them, right? For example, let's take ground combatives, okay? All right, if I'm teaching ground combatives, a lot of the stuff that I would teach a civilian, like how to shrimp out, I can't show law enforcement or security. Why? Because they got guns on their hip, magazines and all that. It's going to be very difficult for them to shrimp out. They will not be able to effectively be able to do it. Or if they got an external vest and it's loaded, they may not be able to get someone in a guard, right? So you have to make sure that however the officer is set up for and geared up for, that whatever you're teaching will be practical and applicable for how their duty gear is set up. So you may not teach a shrimp. You may teach a variation of catch wrestling, how to get up. You may teach a sambo variation of a sambo, or Chinese fast wrestling, or keto, for whatever discipline to fix that issue, right? Because again, not every discipline or every technique that you're trying to teach will be practical for that officer in uniform. Okay, which brings another discipline in, which is how do the officers set up their duty gear, right? When I'm talking to officers, I tell them, don't put anything in the small of your back that if you fall on your back could hurt you. Okay, one, because if you do get taken to the ground, you're going to get hurt by that. Two, just the practicality of reaching behind you. When I tell officers, when they're setting up the duty gear, I tell them, yeah, you can have your backup pair in the back, but always have your primary up front somewhere. Okay, I've seen officers that have their gun on the right side with their magazines on the right side, and they have to go across their body to do a mag reload. Again, I teach not to do that, but again, it's up to the officer's preference and how he's got his duty gear set up. Okay. So if the instructor is teaching a technique that you were asking, and you said, was it feasible? Well, the context of what I saw, it wasn't feasible. One, because he didn't control the arm-bearing limb. Two, because he wasn't teaching transitioning from empty hand to weapon procurement. Now, I'm talking about if this is an officer, whether it be in the private sector or law enforcement. Okay, I always teach, when I'm teaching law enforcement or the private sector, I teach defensive tactics into procurement of a weapon, whether it's baton, taser, pepper spray, a baton, whatever it is to transition from empty hand into weapon procurement. Okay, the last thing I want is for them to sit there and wrestle with a guy for the next 20 minutes. Okay, it's bad enough that most agencies don't teach officers empty hand into procurement. Is usually the default to their weapon, and sometimes it doesn't demand that. Okay, so I hope that kind of answers your question. Again, the idea is for the instructor to have a lineage, a paper trail of who his instructors are. Is what he teaching valid? Some guys are weekend instructors, meaning that for example, I have an apprentice instructor certification. You come and train for 16 hours and you're an apprentice instructor, and you're only allowed to teach level 1 of the hand-to-hand. And they're listed on my site. That doesn't mean that they can't teach other things. It just means that what I've taught him is this, and this is what I know that he can teach because I taught it to him. Some instructors that go for a weekend, get their certification, they go and they'll do a video of a technique, and then you're like, he's not controlling the arm-bearing limb. He's not telling the guys to go from here to here. There's just a big gaps in instructors. But again, it's a clip of a video with no context, so I can't say this or that. I can just go off exactly what I see and what the issues would be. So again, in the video, he's not controlling the arm, bearing limb. He's not instructing to go from defensive tactics into procurement of his either any of his weapons or tools. So that's all I can say on that. And again, there are several types of instructors. There's those that show, those that go, and those that don't know. Okay, they're just learning to be instructors. They don't have that experience, and that experience shows when they're teaching, because they don't have a alternate technique if a technique is broken, or if the technique doesn't work for a particular size student versus the disparity of weight, height, strength, speed, agility. There's those things that you have to account for. Not every technique that I show is going to be feasible for the student. Therefore, I have to have alternatives for that student so that they have a way out of that situation, even if it's just a Band-Aid to get to another either distance in the combat, or where they can create space and draw their weapon, whatever the case may be. Okay, so I hope that answered your questions. I'll try to keep this video short, okay? So as always, keep your head low, your eyes sharp, and your aim true. Peace.